Na drugiej sesji podczas dzisiejszej konferencji. And I'll continue in English as that's the language of the conference. I hope you didn't have a mini heart attack, but it's just really special to be able to address the audience in your mother tongue, especially after living abroad. So we're going to start the space physician roles, responsibilities, and career pathways session. We're going to have 3 presentations, and then we're going to have questions and a discussion afterwards. And we're going to be joined by Zuzanna Paśko, the doctor that you've already could hear from at the last session. So we'll start with... Can you hear me okay this way? Yeah. We'll start with my talk on post-mission medical care. So just to add the background, I'm a medical doctor. I studied in Poland, in Warsaw. I currently live and work in the UK. I work as a clinical teaching fellow in medicine. So I work clinically and I teach students. I also work as a locum aerospace medicine instructor and a visiting research fellow at King's College London. So these are the things I'm doing currently. But I also had a big privilege of observing the post-mission care of Sławomir Żużlański-Wiśniewski at ESA, hence the topic of this presentation. I'll just start with some disclosure info, so I have no financial relationship to disclose, and all the information that I will share here is publicly available, and I'm not going to share any confidential information, just FYI. Before I jump into post-mission care, just quickly go through the environment of spaceflight and the effects on a human body, although Zuzanna already introduced you to that. No, that was really good. We have some people joining for this session now, so I'll still cover some bits. For some of you, it might be just a repetition of what you've already heard. So let's think about the environment itself. The environment of the spaceflight will depend on the vehicle and the type of mission. In this case, I chose the pictures from ESA's website for the Dragon capsule, SpaceX Dragon capsule. So the astronauts are launched into space. They experience some acceleration, vibration within the vehicle. Then as they enter the orbit, they enter the space of weightlessness, the microgravity, as we also tend to call it. They spend some time there, weeks or months, depending on the length of the mission, and they come back where they are reintroduced to Earth's atmosphere and the gravity. So the physiological changes, and I just want to re-emphasize it, they're physiological, not pathological. They're just our bodies are getting used to the new environment, but then as we come back, we need to kind of get used to the Earth's atmosphere again. So that's kind of new after these adaptations. So things like acceleration, vibration, mainly during the launch and then re-entry. Depending on the vehicle as well, re-entry might be compared to like a low-speed traffic collision, more so with Soyuz than the modern SpaceX Dragon capsules. But still, there is some risk of having injury after landing. On board the ISS, it's obviously the weightlessness, the partial gravity, but astronauts are also exposed to ionizing radiation, and very importantly, they are in a very isolated environment, confined spaces with very limited team members and also limited connection to Earth. That also plays a big impact on especially their mental well-being. So you've already seen this slide, this drawing, but I think it really nicely shows the changes and also the position of the human body. So this is actually a natural position of the human body in weightlessness, in microgravity. So note the slightly bent upper and lower limbs and also a slightly angled spine. So to have this position is very natural. That also leads then to some changes, and also the fact that there is no vector of gravity and astronauts are not walking, which was already mentioned earlier, leads to bone mass loss and bone loss and bone density loss, and also loss of muscles. Other bits, obviously, the changes in the fluid distribution. So, as you know, the astronauts very often have these puffy faces. That's because of the redistribution of their plasma to the upper parts of the body. Other changes, such as especially the neurovestibular changes. So there's no up and down, there's no left and right on board the ISS. So our brains are finding it quite confusing. Plus, we don't have other clues. So they might lead to space motion sickness and some symptoms of that. So the adaptations are mainly around, and again, during the 10, 15-minute talk, we cannot do, I cannot talk about everything and all the details, so this is just breezing through this topic. The things that mainly we look at are the reduction of the plasma and blood volume, the aerobic deconditioning, so the muscles, the bones, the orthostatic intolerance, so again, the shift of fluids leads to the blood volume decreasing, and then when returning to Earth is just, it's not enough. That's why you can see astronauts very often in this recumbent semi-lying position. So now moving on to post-mission care, and I divided into 3 sections: the healthcare, the reconditioning, and the long-term monitoring. And I just want to highlight here that post-mission care, similar to the training before the mission, also looking after astronauts during the mission, it's very much multidisciplinary. So it's not only doctors, there are other teams involved that are really, really crucial to make sure the mission goes safely and then the astronaut comes back to their normal physical endurance afterwards. Starting with the healthcare, though, as a doctor. So, as I mentioned, after coming back, the splashdown, the landing, might be compared to a low-speed car traffic collision. So there is some risk of injury, but also astronauts come back quite deconditioned after the mission. So they are surrounded by the medical team pretty much from the first minutes after the vehicle is open. And in the picture on your right-hand side, the top one, you can see astronauts being surrounded by teams. There, that's one of the ESA astronauts. His doctor's over there. There are other people checking, their vitals and examining. And this physical examination goes on until you know that your crew member is safe and stable. You obviously use some clinical tests. And like you take samples, you can do imaging, and you can treat as required. So not everyone will need the same treatment. Very often, astronauts, after coming back, they have some nausea, some vomiting, or some pain after the return. So you just treat whatever is needed, and you recheck until they are stable. After the mission, it's not only the physical health that we look at, but it's also the psychology and the mental part. And it's not only for the astronaut, but also the family. You can imagine that going to space is quite a challenge, quite an extreme environment, but you're also putting through this stress your family. So both the astronauts and their families are surrounded by this support team. Now, on your right-hand side, you can see Samantha Gristopretti, again, one of the ESA astronauts, speaking, having the chat with the media straight after flying from, I think, Houston to Cologne, to where the European Astronaut Center is. And astronauts are exposed not only to this, challenging environment of space, but then when they come back, and as we also see with our Polish astronaut, their schedules are extremely packed. So it's really important as medical team to make sure they have their rest periods scheduled. They can actually have some sleep and have some rest, because that's going to help with this reconditioning process. Nutrition is very important, again, because of all the changes with the muscles and the bones. So looking at proper nutrition, again, so there is a team that adds to that. And finally, the circadian rhythm. If you imagine on the ISS orbits around Earth 16 times a day, so there are 16 sunrises and sunsets. That's quite weird for our circadian rhythm, and astronauts stay on the GMT schedule, but it's all artificial lighting, so they have to pretend that there is day and there is night, so they can have some sleep. So after they come back, they're trying to kind of retrain their circadian rhythm into the normal rhythm that they had before. Reconditioning, again, quite a big part, and that will be, again, a separate team of personal trainers, physiotherapists that look at the muscles around the spine, and they also structure the training and gym sessions for astronauts as part of their recovery after coming back. And finally, long-term monitoring. Quite important, I really like that. Sławomir already mentioned it earlier, that the science was, well, the experiments were done, and for the public very often it looks like, well, that's it, the mission ended. But actually, the science continues, and the monitoring of astronauts also continues after the mission. That helps us figure out what are the long-term effects of the space flight, and also what are the occupational hazards. So, because if you think about it, it's just a job like any other. So we want to know, same as with interventional cardiologists, they're exposed to ionizing radiation, how many years, like, if there is a higher rate of cancers or something else. Similar with astronauts, quite important to have that surveillance and look into those to then try to come back and write guidelines so they are safe for next missions. And I will conclude here, again, as I mentioned, in 10-15 minutes, really difficult to cover everything. Just a few acknowledgements. I'm really, really grateful for the space medicine team at ESA to have me, that they were really welcoming, showing me how the care, post-mission care looks like, sharing their knowledge and experience. Really grateful for the Polish Space Agency at Sigma Labs for helping to arrange this, and finally, Center for Human Applied Physiological Sciences from King's College London, where I'm still the visiting research fellow. And obviously, I cannot thank Sławomir enough for letting me be one of the observers. I'm sure as doctors, you've experienced this in med school when we're, entering the room with another doctor as students, and they're like just asking the patient if they're fine with us observing. So I'm really grateful for Sławomir to be this patient that allowed me to observe his recovery. That's it. If you'd like to connect, I'm obviously here. And yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. Thank you. And now, I'm going to introduce for the UK perspective and experience in developing space medicine, Wing Commander Bonnie Posselt.
Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to see if I can do the mobile one so that everyone can still hear me. Is that okay if I do this one? Hi, can you all? Oh, yeah, that definitely works. Okay. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the kind invitation. I'm going to talk to you today about aerospace medicine from the UK perspective, how we've built it up, how we've developed it, and hopefully give this audience some food for thought when Poland is thinking about supporting the space medicine side to space operations. So I have nothing to declare. I am employed by the Royal Air Force in the UK, but all opinions are very much my own. So who am I? I am a medical doctor. I'm a consultant in aviation and space medicine in the UK. I'm one of 4 military consultants. there are 6 civilian consultants in the specialty, and we have 7 trainees, just to give you an idea of the size of our specialty in the UK and the growth that we're fostering. I have a PhD with the Air Force Research Lab. I did an exchange posting to the US Air Force, and my research background is in helmet-mounted displays, vision systems, and aircrew vision standards. I was a medical officer for an analog space mission in the deserts of Oman. I'm a graduate of the International Space University, fellow of the Aerospace Medical Association, of which I sit on the executive committee, and the Royal Aeronautical Society in the UK. Also sit on the Space, Life and Biomedical Sciences Committee in the UK, and have, as a trainee representative, sat on the Specialty Advisory Council that looks at the ongoing development of the specialty of aviation and space medicine. And along with Veronika, I'm the UK rep on the European Space Agency Medical Board, of which Veronika is going to talk about after me. So I don't think I need to sell it to this audience, because it was beautifully articulated in the keynote speech earlier about what the benefits of human spaceflight. Despite its cost, humans in space have the unique ability to inspire, having that human presence and inspire in a way that robots simply don't quite capture the imagination. And the reason for that is because every human on Earth is able to relate to a human in space. They can imagine themselves in space. They can aspire to do that themselves. So they have that human connection. Scientific astronauts, humans, have the ability to be creative, flexible, adaptable, to perform scientific experiments. And space enables us, it gives us that platform, that unique microgravity or altered gravity platform to conduct scientific experiments to the benefit of those of us here on Earth. It also drives innovation. It fuels interest in the scientific sector, creating high-tech jobs. It is economic. For every €1 spent to ESA, that country will get a €7.5 return to their economy in the long term. So that economic benefit. Also, the professional jobs, the high-tech jobs, are normally higher paid jobs as well, contributing to the economy in that way. Education, the opportunity to link human space missions to STEM outreach, as again has been beautifully demonstrated with Slovak's contribution to all universities and schools, again inspiring the younger generation. It's a soft power. Again, you've illustrated beautifully, having a pole in space gives your country something to sell, to talk about, gives you that influence on an international stage. It gives you the ability to collaborate and work with other nations. And there's something just fundamental to seeing your own country's flag on a spacesuit in space. It makes you feel proud. And to have that European sovereign capability, particularly in a dynamically changing geopolitical world. Okay. In the UK, our first cosmonaut, or first person in space, was Helen Sharman. Project Juno, it was a Soviet-British mission to Mir. It was sponsored by industry. But unfortunately, we didn't have much for quite a while after that. In 1984, we had 4 British government personnel, 2 military and 2 civilian, civil servant personnel, was selected and trained with NASA to deliver military satellites into space. However, with the Challenger disaster, their subsequent flights were cancelled, and the British government astronauts never flew, and those satellites were deployed using without humans later on. And then we had quite a dearth of any UK human activity in spaceflight. We did still have some UK astronauts, but they all used citizenships of other countries, predominantly American citizenships, in order to fly to space. So 2010, we had Tim Peake, who was our first British ESA astronaut. And we have been lucky enough to have 3 astronauts recruited in the recent ESA campaign, 2 reserves, and one particular which is a real novel, exciting change, is one of our astronauts selected through the para-astronaut campaign. The UK has also said that it has an ambition to have a commercial, a fully British commercial flight partnered with Axiom and sponsored by industry, so separate to ESA, and doing that ourselves. And then within the military, there is a NATO working group titled The Medical Support to the Space Domain that is just being set up, that the UK has a representative on it. We also are pretty active in the UK in the research side of things, supporting space operations. So back in the 50s, at the Institute of Aerospace Medicine, or Aviation Medicine at the time, there was a lot of research into high-altitude protection that is relevant to the space domain, pressure suits, and protective life support equipment. Centrifuge, and more recently, centrifuge profiles specific for the space domain, and published. And then other universities around the country looking at the effects of microgravity through kind of bed rest studies. So the UK Space Agency actually, though, is pretty new. So back in 1985, we had the British National Space Centre, and that was replaced in 2010 with the announcement that we had a British astronaut, Tim Peake. And that gave us a dedicated budget. We had an agency that was then responsible for all space activities, and the aim was for it to coordinate UK space activities. However, a lot of his budget was just sent direct to ESA rather than maintaining its own control. And one of the reasons for that is when you send budget to ESA, it's then protected at ESA. There's not the risk of it being cut in annual cycles in the UK. And so it was thought that maybe safer to send our space money to ESA than investing in domestic growth within the UK. And in 2025, it still exists, but it's been absorbed into the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. And this is a merger designed to streamline space activities, streamline them and kind of keep it agile. That's the aim. So where does medicine fit into this? So the specialty, aviation and space medicine, and I very much highlight the aviation side of things. Aerospace medicine has always existed since humans first took to the sky. So I'd say like 80-90% of space medicine is rooted in the foundations and the principles of aviation medicine. And so that's why the two specialties are interlinked. So in the UK, the addition of space medicine is not trained in isolation. It is aviation and space medicine. The two are combined together. And it is the studying the factors affecting the human body, as we've already spoken about today, and how do you protect those individuals to perform to the best of their ability in that remote, austere, demanding environment. We act as experts on the medical and physiological aspects of the environment, but not just clinical and the support to the human clinically, but also in the life support systems, the engineering side of things. How do we help engineers build things that actually work for the humans that need to use them? So, like I said, aerospace medicine's always existed, but in order for it to be fully recognised and regulated, it was only in 2016 that the General Medical Council approved a specific 4-year curriculum, training curriculum designed so that when someone comes out the end and says that they're a consultant in aviation space medicine, you know what they've had to achieve and the training that they've had to do to get there. It also means that they then are on the specialist register as as a specialist in aviation space medicine, and they're annually regulated to make sure that they're still practicing within the limits of their license. And this regulation side of things is an important aspect, I personally feel, in aerospace medicine. The framework within the UK for the specialty links in, it's multidisciplinary. It links in academia, it links in industry. So for us, one of our main partners in aerospace is Kinetic. We have the military, the applied side of aerospace medicine, and very importantly, the regulatory side, how you can do things correctly so that people don't get hurt. In the current UK position, we have for space side of things. So we have the National Space Centre, and that's part of our education outreach, inspiring younger generations to space activities. There's proposals for spaceports. We have 3 spaceports that we will certainly support vertical launch, but looking at horizontal launch as well. These are managed through the Department of Transport, and again are still in early stages, but there are 3 designated spaceports. The Civil Aviation Authority are our regulatory body, and they have been tasked with managing that side of things for human spaceflight certification and operations. So we already do have some policy. Before we have human spaceflight, it's important to have the framework to enable it to happen safely going forward. We have a national space strategy that was published in 21, and that looks at really setting out the scene, the vision of using space. The UK as a hub to attract space and using it to grow our economy and the sector. Although it very much does focus on non-human aspects of space. There's 1 or 2 lines in it talking about collaboration with Artemis and with ESA, but very much focused on non-human space. In the military, we have a UK Space Command that has been set up again in 2021, and we have a military defence space strategy. Again, not much human space flight in there, and we have no desire currently within the MAD to support human space flight operations. But as I mentioned, space is recognised as an operating domain. And yes, currently all of our space medicine is currently supporting the occupational assessment for ground-based space operators. But it's important to have the medical aspect when you're thinking of human spaceflight in the military going forward, so that you are prepared in looking at what would the selection standards be, what are the appropriate space vehicles, what are the tasks that your military astronauts are going to be required to do. So you build in that support and preparation early on before you have astronauts, and then trying to filter back and work out solutions to problems. Better to try and address that early on. Challenges for the UK in space medicine. So there's been a lot of talk about connecting dots. This is my personal opinion. I don't feel like in the UK we have connected all the dots. We have a default reliance to others. So we have British astronauts. How are they supported? Let ESA deal with it. So there is that shift of responsibility to basically not having a sovereign capability in the space medicine side of things. It is difficult to access funding and prioritisation. For medical research, we are not prioritised when there are other competing and very noble areas of research in clinical medicine. So it's about how do we advocate, how do we raise the profile, how do we articulate the benefits of research in the space medical domain. We have a limited workforce. How do we grow that workforce? How do we support them? How do we not just create opportunities for them, but how do we fund them in jobs? Can be stovepipe with a lack of communication. So We have a lot of the infrastructure. We have human centrifuges. We have hyperbaric chambers. We have a formal, accredited, recognized training program. We have a space agency. We have British astronauts. But we don't have space med support or involvement in human spaceflight in the UK. So what is the vision? Well, again, caveated this is my personal opinion, is I would love to see a dedicated lead for medicine, for medical activities within the government organisation. Currently, we don't have that. So that would be someone who could coordinate human or activities related to human spaceflight. I would love to be able to grow capability and expertise. We have a lot of very enthusiastic, dedicated people, and I would love to be able to involve them with real funded job opportunities. And this could be done through ESA, or it could be done through national programmes. I'd love to have some more international bilateral arrangements and involvement on multinational programmes. And again, an idea of some of the vision. We have Dr. Hodgkinson, who again has a vision for a spacesuit laboratory in the UK, and it is something that he's developing there. So what do you need to have space medicine as a capability in your country? Well, you need the vision. And I would say the most important thing, above everything, is you need political will. You need a permissive political environment. You need advocacy at the highest level of people to realise the benefit of sovereign capabilities. And I'm heartened to hear that you had sovereign doctors supporting your astronaut in space. I think that's really awesome. You need dedicated funding that's not just going to be snatched away from you. These things don't come cheaply. We rely a lot on enthusiasm and people volunteering to do things, but we need dedicated funding to support these operations. We need investment from industry, from government to support all of these things going forward. We need collaboration. And we need facilitation. We don't want stovepipes. You need to be able to talk to the other organisations, either through MOUs or understandings written down. So that very much is just my own personal opinion on my experience working in aviation space medicine in the UK, and ways that I think that we could do better, and ways to hopefully share the challenges that we faced, but also the lessons learnt and how we can all work better in this area. Credit to Dr. Hodgkinson and Dr. Anderton, who are both my colleagues in aviation space medicine in the UK. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. So as I mentioned, we're going to take questions at the end of the session. So I'll invite Dr. Veronika Puisa now for the presentation on the role of ESA Medical Board.
Right, good afternoon. Good luck to me following up on that kind of presentation. That's been absolutely fantastic. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this conference, and congratulations to the organisers. And what a fantastic day we're having. What a wonderful conference it has been. Thank you so much. It's a great honour to be here. My name is Veronika Puisa. I'm a medical doctor as well. I'm originally from Latvia, but I live and work in the UK. I am a rural general and emergency practitioner by my main specialty, with interest in aerospace medicine. I work in north of Scotland, but I'm also a visiting research fellow at King's College London. And together with Bonnie, I also sit serving member of a European Space Agency medical board representing Latvia. And today, what I'll do today is I'll talk through what ESA Medical Board is, why it's there, what it does and what it doesn't do, and walk you through how research proposals are being reviewed and approved. And I am here in the personal capacity today, and all views are expressed are my own and do not represent those of ESA. human research in space pushes biology far beyond what we could safely test on Earth, with factors like microgravity, radiations, and isolation, among many others. And every experiment involves real people, whether those are astronauts or volunteers or staff members in isolation studies. So ESA has created an independent medical board whose job is to make sure that those studies are ethical, safe, and scientifically justified and feasible before any measurement is taken at all. So it is there to protect participants, ESA's agency reputation, and continuity of operations. So it is the agency's top governance body for human subject research and sitting right underneath the Human and Robotic Exploration Directorate. So what we do is we review every project that involves human participants, whether that's astronauts on the ISS or whether that's analog studies participants in the bed rest or parabolic studies that involve ESA facilities. Board is multinational and it includes representatives from ESA member state countries. We do not have any representatives from Poland yet. Board is multidisciplinary. It includes physicians and scientists and researchers, physiologists, and representatives from flight surgeon and astronaut team. Most of our work is actually done remotely, sitting in front of a computer. But we do meet formally, usually once a year, and the board can have an ad hoc meeting if an urgent decision is needed, for example, if there was a medical event on orbit. So it is important to clarify boundaries, what ESA Med Board does not do. So ESA Med Board does not manage astronaut healthcare. That is the job of flight surgeon teams, which is distinctly different, although we do interact with them via representative of flight surgeon team. It certainly does not replace an ethics committee. Ethics committee approval has to be obtained before ESA Med Board review. It does not review any animal or engineering research, and it does not directly certify astronaut crew for flights. It reviews and endorses the documentation presented by the flight surgeon team. So all ESA human research reviews are built on a few clear guiding principles. First of all participation is voluntary, even for astronauts. A consent must be fully informed and clearly documented and written. Risks must be minimized and justified by potential scientific value. Data and samples are handled under strict data protection rules and according to ESA privacy rules. And the review must stay independent from the programmatic pressures. So this chart is following the main approval flow of the ISS experiments that involve US orbital segment of the ISS. In this case, for example purposes, involving astronauts from multiple agencies. So every project starts with a ARD, or Activity Research Document, which then obtains ethics committee review, and all of that together forms a LSRP that is then being submitted to the ESA Medical Board for review. Sometimes the board can, suggest amendments or raise further questions, and sometimes there are several iterations of that review process. So once ESA Med Board approval is obtained, the LSRP goes for review to other agencies whose astronauts are involved in the process, and almost always NASA, well in this case always NASA, IRB as well as a reviewer, and once all of those agency approvals are gained, it goes to a multilateral board review, which gives it a final blessing. For ESA-only projects, such as Posselt projects, which some of the audience have a lot of experience with, the process is largely similar, but with some nuances. So ESA Medical Board approval works largely the same. And the multilateral board review is mandatory, while the NASA IRB is not mandatory, however, strongly advised due to their close involvement with the project coordination. And important to know that ESA do not allow data on an individual astronaut to be published. ESA also runs a lot of human research on other platforms and locations, such as bed rest, dry immersion, isolation, and parabolic flight campaigns. Review process is largely similar, except that full LSRP is not necessarily needed. We usually review ethics package and consent form presented to us for review. And I feel it might be useful to talk through what generally makes a good submissions and what kind of applications we do come through. So when we review protocols, strong applications share similar traits. First of all, a clear scientific question with its relevance for space science justified. Realistic estimates on crew time and workload and resources. Concrete task mitigation plan and emergency procedures. Transparent data and sample management, as well as hardware readiness and prior ethics approval. Pitfalls that we sometimes come across might include vague aims, overambitious workloads, or weak consent wording, or unclear data handling. Although I have to say that it's probably not, the pitfalls are, while common, actually not that common, I would say. Most research that we review is actually of excellent quality. So going forwards, we of course would love to see the future where ESA participates in research projects beyond low Earth orbit. We're also adapting to collaborations with commercial and national partners. We're improving data governance frameworks and adapting to increasing diversity in astronaut and subject population. And of course, we continue to coordinate closely with other agencies via the multilateral board. So to sum up, the ESA Medical Board is where research, ethics, and operations interact. Its work is often invisible, but it's what allows ESA human subject research to happen safely and credibly. Thank you for listening.
Right, thank you very much. So we'll go for the questions, if there are any questions to our panelists. And as I mentioned earlier, we're joined by Dr. Susanna Paśko, who is also working at European Space Agency and had a presentation during the previous session. Any questions from the audience, or should I start the discussion? Okay, yeah.
Wonderful speeches, thank you very much. I have a basic question, because we are talking about the changes in skeleton, in our body. How long does it take to have to observe first changes in, for instance, bone density? How long you have to fly to see first changes?
Yeah, I can go first because I actually included it in my presentation in the previous panel. The first changes overall, it's within the seconds of the launch. The ones in the bones and muscles, they're already noticeable within the first hours. Obviously, on a minimal level, it accumulates over time, but it starts very, very soon.
Where it starts to be dangerous.
So I think
So what is a safe flight?
so it depends on what you can do, right? So back in the days of Mir or early spaceflight, bone density loss was a really significant factor. These days, some of the mitigations to try and prevent that are really incredible. So, for example, after a 6-month mission, Tim Peake only lost 2% of his bone density loss. And that's due to a regular schedule of exercise, but it takes 2 hours a day of particularly loading type exercises. And the same mission 10 years ago, or 10 years prior, would have lost up to 20% of his bone density. That almost is impossible to regain later in life. So you're hampering people. So, and there's lots of excitement on future mitigations. So medical interventions, similar to the medications that older folks use to prevent osteoporosis, and some different types of exercises, particularly looking forward to the exploration missions where you're not going to have the same amount of space, physical space, to do exercises. So we're trying to miniaturize and optimize the devices used to load the bones. And yeah, so I'll hand over back to you, from your experience on how long. But you can get changes if you don't do anything. If you don't do any exercise, you're going to see loss in your bone mass within a week, 2 weeks. If you do exercise appropriately, but it's a big investment in your time, then you can minimize your bone loss. But you're never going to get stronger bones in space.
I actually have nothing more to add. I think that was a very comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the amazing talks. And the UK is well ahead of us in terms of the space medicine specialty as a recognised physiology specialty for physicians. How do you see Polish space medicine as a specialty? What kind of regulatory hurdles or others do you envisage for us?
That's too complex for me to answer. But I would actually put it back on you. What were the challenges when you were actually going through that journey? Because it's quite, I mean, you as the UK, because to get it regulated, obviously, along the way there were some steps. So I guess it's a question of, have you got any tips for us, what to look at when we're trying to regulate things like that?
Yeah, and it's a long process. So as I mentioned, aerospace medicine has always existed, but it was only in 2016 that the General Medical Council recognised it as a approved training pathway to that. So it takes political desire. So there was a political imperative from a regulatory point of view that people practicing in medical doctors practicing in aerospace medicine were doing so out of step of all other medical specialties. So there was a political will from a legal point of view that we were not defined as to how we were practicing. That then took, probably a decade for those individuals practicing prior to the curriculum to, between industry, kind of the industry regulators and academia, to say, okay, well, what should the curriculum be? So they used to meet every quarter and define what should be in the curriculum. That then had to be approved through, for us, it's the Royal College of Physicians is where we sit. We do not have our own faculty because there's just not enough of us. The fees for a faculty, to be a member of the faculty, would be thousands and thousands of pounds. So we don't have a faculty. So our de facto faculty is the Royal College of Physicians. So I would say, and you also need people to fund training. Okay, and this is an issue that they've had in America, is if you want doctors regulated in and approved, you need to fund their training, because in the UK, as you can appreciate, aerospace medicine is not going to be funded by the NHS, because there's not going to be hospitals full of pilots and astronauts requiring medical care. So you need buy-in from organisations to fund people for the 4-year training programme in order to get a doctor at the end of it. At some point, we might have a glut of doctors that can then just be employed by organisations fully trained, but we don't at the moment. And that's something that, like I said, the US is struggling with, because you've got companies, commercial space companies, want to hire doctors. Okay, but if their doctors don't exist, you need to kind of fund the training to get someone who's board accredited, certified, legally and professionally registered as aerospace medicine professionals. Not all doctors are equal. We all have different specialties, and I think there's a lack of understanding outside of medicine that a GP is different to an emergency medicine doctor, who's different to an aerospace medicine doctor. So I would never just walk into a job, a cardiovascular thoracic operating job. I'm not certified to do that. And I think in aerospace medicine, sometimes there is an understanding, well, you're a doctor, you can just do it. You need formal training, you need accreditation, you need experience as well. And I think that's where that your country is doing a great job at providing that experience. And it's trying then to support the specialty to enhance that experience, to then have a legal framework that enables it to exist in its own entity. So challenges would be political will, understanding about how it is a separate specialty. It's not just an add-on to another specialty. And then working and collaborating, not just clinically in your own area, because it's a collaboration between industry, academia, the military, because the military are the ones who often have the infrastructure like centrifuges and hyperbaric chambers. So it's a collaboration between those four bits. So those would be the three things I take away: is advocacy, political will, what else did I say? Funding, and understanding that aerospace medicine is a specialty in its own right.
I would also really like to add that you asked the question about the specialization in space medicine, but I would also like to communicate it to the community, the medical community, that there are two paths I think that we could take. Because on the one hand, we have this flight surgeon, who is like the astronaut is a patient to them, so it requires trust. If something comes up in the research that disqualifies an astronaut for further flights, it's basically the end of the career. So usually the flight surgeons do not perform, at least in ESA, the scientific research. So on the other hand, we also have medical doctors who are not flight surgeons, but who perform the science to push the boundaries forward. And obviously the flight surgeons inform our research. We are in contact with the medical operations team. They help us choose the projects. If we're in doubt, they come up with the priorities. But there's also this other path that you can take that is, I think, not highlighted, hasn't been highlighted today yet.
Absolutely agree. I'll just add the NHS that Bonnie mentioned is like the equivalent of NFZ, so that's basically the National Health Service. So I believe I cannot imagine the training being done through the NFZ in Poland, right?
I don't have a question. I wanted to add a comment from a Polish perspective on that excellent question. Because we are at the beginning, in my understanding, we are at the beginning of comeback of the space medicine in Poland. And my dream would be, and I spoke a lot with Lieutenant Colonel Magdalena Kozak about that, that now the first step for us should be to focus on the experiments and the results and how we can utilize this experiment, because I was so surprised to see how many military utilization can be there for these experiments, like with this radiation device that could monitor the radiation exposure of the pilots, both of the transportation aircrafts and the jet pilots, and there are many others. So I would say this is the first step. So let us jointly work on the results of the experiments. But then I agree that we would need a broader strategy and, of course, political will to execute it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I think it's a good takeaway that there are different pathways, the clinical, the research. Just to end this discussion, I have a question to Veronika, because we had that chat before. Because we're approached sometimes by students asking us, so how do you get involved? And I think it's really impressive that, coming from Latvia, so one of the countries that just joined ESA, you're sitting on the ESA medical board. So I just wanted to end this panel, ask you, what are your, let's say, top tips for doctors who want to get involved in aerospace medicine?
Oh dear. I think just trying to remember myself still now very much, and a few years ago. Well, I mean, I would certainly recommend not taking no for an answer in a very polite way, and being quite opportunistic, and take any opportunity, for example, like this fantastic conference, to raise your hand, ask a question, start a conversation, because you absolutely never know what. I've gained the most incredible opportunities alongside my career, while sort of going one way, ended up taking scenic route into other areas, like, for example, ended up working in motorsports medicine or Formula One as well, via going to actually aviation medicine conference and sort of asking questions there. So I would certainly suggest taking every opportunity you can and talk to everybody you can and collaborate with everybody you can. That would be my first point. Not taking no for an answer. Sometimes it takes really, really, really long time, and sometimes it feels like nothing exciting is happening for very, very long time. And then something exciting is happening very briefly, and then nothing exciting is happening again. So I think it's good to remind that majority, say, of my days are actually normal clinical work in a hospital. It's still very much day-to-day thing. And that there are many ways to get involved as well. So there are paths through ESA, there are say commercial projects and paths, there are analog projects, there are, say, paths via, as you mentioned earlier, via research involvement, and there are paths to try to get into clinical involvement, for example, the observationship that you've done. There are many paths to do things that are exciting and interesting. And as a final guiding principle, I would certainly recommend to do what excites you, do what you like, because most of the time it is unpaid, and most of the shouldn't be, but it is. And we do most of the stuff that we do in our own time, and we're all hoping for the future where there will be more opportunities, there will be more funding. But the reality that I would recommend someone to be prepared for is to follow what you genuinely want to do, because you'll probably have to do that on your own resource for a while. But it is incredibly exciting, and we all really, really enjoy what we do. And it is an absolutely fantastic, incredible community of like-minded, passionate people that is incredibly welcoming and incredibly supportive. And we all are very, very happy to share our paths and our experiences.
Love it. So I think we're going to end with that for the lunch break. And it was also a nice segue for our next session after lunch break, when we're going to hear about the analogs. So another opportunity to get involved in aerospace medicine. Thank you very much.